a crisp October morning in 2020, 10 hikers, 8 men and 2 women, set out from the trailhead of the Appalachian Mountains, their laughter echoing through the dense forest as they adjusted their backpacks and snapped a cheerful group photo against the rugged peaks. Clad in vibrant gear, their spirits were as high as the towering ridges they aimed to conquer, a seasoned crew led by the confident stride of Marcus Reed, a 38-year-old survival expert with a knack for navigating the wild. Beside him walked his sister, Emily, 32, and her best friend, Sarah, 29, the only women in the group, their bright smiles a stark contrast to the shadowed woods. The others, James, 40, a former Marine, Tom, 35, an avid photographer, Daniel, 28, a quiet engineer, Liam, 33, a wildlife enthusiast, Ethan, 27, a college student, and Chris, 30, a nurse, formed a tight-knit band, their backpacks bulging with supplies for a planned 3-day trek. They were a picture of preparedness, their sleeping bags rolled tight, their maps meticulously marked, their camaraderie a shield against the unknown. Yet, as the sun dipped below the horizon on October 3, 2020, their absence from the designated meeting point sent a shiver through the small Appalachian town of Boone, North Carolina. They had vanished, swallowed by the mountains despite Marcus's decades of expertise, leaving behind only the echo of their final selfie and a gnawing silence that would haunt the region for years. For the families waiting in that quiet town, the first hours stretched into an agonizing eternity. Marcus's wife, Claire, paced the porch of their modest home, her eyes fixed on the winding road where her husband should have appeared, his 10-year-old son tugging at her sleeve with questions she couldn't answer. Emily's husband, Paul, sat by the phone, his hands trembling as he replayed her last voicemail, a cheerful update about a stunning overlook, wondering if it was the last he'd hear of her voice. Sarah's mother, Margaret, clutched a faded photo of her daughter, her tears staining the edges as she whispered prayers into the night. The group had promised a return by 6 p.m., a deadline etched into their meticulous plans, but as the clock ticked past 9 p.m., the unthinkable took root. This wasn't a simple delay. These were not novices who'd misjudged a trail. Marcus had taught survival courses, could read the forest like a map, and had drilled his team on every contingency: extra food, water purification, emergency beacons. The absence of a signal, a call, a trace was a wound that cut deeper with each passing hour. By midnight, Claire's steady hands dialed the emergency line, her voice breaking as she reported the disappearance of 10 souls into the Appalachian wild. The search began at dawn, a frantic pulse of helicopters slicing through the misty air, their rotors a desperate hymn over the dense canopy. Rangers from the Pisgah National Forest mobilized, their faces grim as they fanned out across the rugged terrain, boots crunching over leaves slick with dew. The Appalachians are a labyrinth of steep ridges, hidden ravines, and thick undergrowth, a place where sound dies in the foliage and visibility shrinks to mere feet. The team scoured the planned route, a challenging but well-trodden path along the Blue Ridge Parkway, calling out names that bounced back unanswered. They found nothing. No snapped branches, no discarded gear, no footprints softened by the damp earth. Marcus, with his encyclopedic knowledge, would have left signs, blazes on trees, a makeshift shelter. Yet the forest offered only silence, a mocking void that swallowed hope. Days turned to weeks, the search expanding to include volunteers from neighboring counties, their bright jackets a fleeting splash of color against the endless green. Drones buzzed overhead, thermal imaging scanned the slopes, but the mountains held their secret tight, the 10 hikers erased as if they'd never been. As the first month faded, the official effort scaled back, resources dwindling under the weight of no leads. The command post at the trailhead was dismantled, its maps curling in the damp air, and the news crews packed away their cameras, leaving behind a town steeped in grief. Yet for the families, the silence was a torment they couldn't escape. Claire spent sleepless nights poring over Marcus's journals, searching for a clue in his meticulous notes, while Paul drove the park's perimeter, his eyes scanning every shadow. Margaret joined local forums, Her posts a plea for information that drew only speculation, wild theories of bear attacks, alien abductions, or a mass decision to vanish. The public narrative shifted, whispers growing into a cruel rumor. Had Marcus, the survival guru, staged their disappearance to escape his life? The idea gnawed at Claire, a betrayal she refused to entertain, knowing the man who'd built their home with his own hands would never abandon his son. Still, the lack of evidence fueled the story, turning the hikers into ghosts of Appalachian lore, their fate a riddle the mountains refused to solve. 4 years slipped by, each anniversary a quiet vigil marked by fading hope and enduring pain. The case file gathered dust in a ranger station drawer, a cold relic of a mystery unsolved. Claire raised her son alone. His questions about his father met with stories of Marcus's courage, while Paul and Margaret clung to memories, their lives shadowed by absence. Then, on a gray August morning in 2024, 2 kayakers drifted across a remote lake nestled deep within the Nantahala National Forest, their paddles cutting through the still water. The lake, a glassy mirror framed by dark pines, was a place few ventured, its shores choked with fallen logs and tangled roots. As they glided near the edge, one of them, a young man named Jake, spotted something unnatural bobbing among the debris, shapes that didn't belong, their colors muted but unmistakable. He squinted, his heart quickening as he realized they were sleeping bags, waterlogged and torn, their fabric sagging with the weight of years. The discovery sent a jolt through him, a chill that had nothing to do with the morning mist. This wasn't litter. This was a clue, a silent scream from the past, and it would unravel a story the Appalachians had buried for far too long. Subscribe now, or the truth of what happened to these lost souls might fade forever into the silence you could have broken. The kayakers hauled the sodden sleeping bags to shore, their hands trembling as they laid them out on the rocky bank. The fabric, once vibrant reds, blues, and greens, was faded and frayed, the zippers rusted shut, the insulation clumped into useless clumps. Jake, a 24-year-old biology student, and his partner Mia, 26, a park volunteer, knew enough to recognize the significance of their find. These weren't abandoned camping gear. They bore the marks of a group, the stitching patterns matching the high-end brands favored by serious hikers. They snapped photos, their phones shaky as they documented the scene, and alerted the rangers at the nearest station. By noon, Ranger Elena Ortiz, a 15-year veteran with a weathered gaze, arrived, her truck kicking up dust as she surveyed the lake's edge. The sleeping bags triggered a dormant memory. Vague reports of a missing group from 2020, a case she'd inherited but never cracked. She bagged the evidence, her mind racing as she drove back to base, the weight of 4 years pressing down. At the forensic lab in Asheville, the sleeping bags were dissected with clinical precision. Dr. Helen Carter, a materials scientist with a reputation for unraveling mysteries, led the analysis, her team cutting samples from the fabric, testing for organic residue, and dating the degradation. The results were a puzzle. The bags had been submerged for months, not years, their conditions suggesting recent exposure to water rather than a 4-year soak. Microscopic traces of mud and pollen pointed to a specific watershed, a clue that sent Ortiz back to the maps. The lake, fed by a network of streams from the higher ridges, became the starting point of a renewed search, its dark waters now a beacon in the investigation. Helicopters returned, their blades chopping the air, while ground teams traced the streams uphill, their boots slipping on moss-covered rocks. The terrain was brutal, steep drops, hidden caves, and dense thickets that swallowed light, and yet the sleeping bags had come from somewhere, carried by a force the mountains couldn't hide. The breakthrough came on the 5th day, when a ranger named Tyler, a wiry 30-year-old with a climber's instincts, spotted a faint trail of debris along a narrow creek bed. Torn fabric, a snapped buckle, a water bottle cap, all pointed upstream to a shadowed ravine where the water roared after storms. The team rappelled down, their ropes taut against the slick granite, and there, wedged beneath an overhang, they found more. A shredded backpack, its contents spilled, maps, a compass, a child's toy that didn't fit. The toy, a small plastic dinosaur, belonged to Ethan's nephew, a gift he'd carried for luck, a detail Claire had mentioned in her endless pleas. The ravine was a graveyard of sorts, the hikers' gear scattered by a flash flood that must have swept through, a violent surge that explained the sleeping bag's journey to the lake. Ortiz pieced it together. A storm in 2023, one of the wettest on record, had likely dislodged the evidence, carrying it downstream after years of concealment. The realization shifted the focus. Marcus and his team hadn't vanished by choice. They'd been overtaken by nature's fury, their survival skills no match for a sudden deluge. Subscribe now, or let the memory of these lost hikers vanish into the void you could have illuminated. The ravine led to a larger cave system, its entrance choked with vines, a place the original search had missed in its haste. Inside, the air was cool and still, the floor littered with bones, human remains, scattered but identifiable by the tattered clothing clinging to them. Forensic teams moved in, their lights casting long shadows as they cataloged the scene. 10 skeletons, their positions suggesting a desperate huddle, their gear piled as if for warmth. Marcus's remains bore a fractured skull, likely from a fall, while Emily and Sarah's showed signs of prolonged exposure, their smaller frames less equipped to endure. The cave told a story of survival turned tragedy. Trapped by the flood, they'd sought refuge, their supplies dwindling, their hope fading with each breath. DNA confirmed their identities, a confirmation that broke Claire's stoic resolve, her sobs echoing as she clutched the dinosaur toy. The public reeled, the mystery solved, but the loss magnified, the Appalachians revealed as both sanctuary and executioner. Yet one question lingered. How had they ended up so far from their route? The investigation turned to the cave's geology, mapping its tunnels with laser precision to trace the flood's path. Geologists found evidence of a collapse, a rockslide triggered by the 2023 storm that had sealed the hikers' fate, burying them deeper until the water carved a new exit. Interviews with locals unearthed a storm tale, a night of thunder so fierce it shook windows in Boone, a deluge that reshaped the mountains. The pieces fit. Marcus, leading his group off trail to avoid the worst of the weather, had misjudged the terrain, leading them into the ravine's trap. The sleeping bags dislodged by the flood floated to the lake, a final message from the lost. Claire visited the site, her son beside her, laying flowers where the cave mouth gaped, a ritual of closure amid unending grief. The story spread, a cautionary tale of nature's indifference but also of human resilience, their final days a testament to camaraderie. For the families, the truth brought peace and pain, a duality they'd carry forever. The discovery of the cave and its grim content sent shockwaves through the forensic team, their sterile lights illuminating a scene that spoke of desperation and defiance. Dr. Helen Carter returned to the lab, her focus narrowing on the remains, each bone a clue to the hikers' final hours. The skeletons were meticulously catalogued. Marcus's fractured skull suggested a leader's sacrifice, perhaps shielding others as he fell. Emily and Sarah's smaller frames bore signs of malnutrition, their last acts likely tending to the group. The cave floor yielded scraps of fabric, a melted flashlight, and a journal page, its ink blurred but legible enough to reveal Marcus's final entry. Trapped. Water rising. Holding on. The words pierced Claire when she saw them. A father's resolve etched in fading ink, a testament to his fight for his team. The geologist's mapping confirmed the rockslide's role, a natural tomb sealed by the 2023 flood, its force later carving a path to free the sleeping bags. Ortiz coordinated with meteorologists, their data painting a picture of a storm that dumped 12 inches of rain in a single night, a deluge that turned streams into torrents and ravines into death traps. The investigation expanded, tracing the hikers' last known movements. Locals recalled seeing the group near a scenic overlook on October 2nd, their laughter carrying over the wind, but no one noted their detour. Satellite imagery from that day showed a clear sky, a cruel irony that masked the storm brewing inland. The team hypothesized Marcus, sensing the shift, had led them off trail to seek shelter, a decision that saved them briefly but doomed them to the ravine. Divers scoured the lake, recovering more gear, a tent pole, a boot, each item a shard of their lost lives. Claire and Paul sifted through the evidence, their hands trembling as they identified Emily's scarf, its green hue faded but familiar. The public watched, transfixed, as the story unfolded, the Appalachians' beauty now a shroud over tragedy. Yet a shadow lingered. The journal hinted at a struggle, scratches on the cave walls, a broken knife, suggesting not all had succumbed to nature alone. Ortiz ordered a deeper forensic sweep, her instincts prickling at the possibility of foul play. The sleeping bag's condition, recently waterlogged, raised questions. Had someone moved them, or had the flood's timing been misjudged? The cave's isolation fueled speculation, whispers of a cover-up or a survivor's guilt. Claire refused to believe Marcus would lead them astray, her faith in his skill unyielding, while Margaret clung to Sarah's memory, her tears a silent plea for answers. The truth teetered on the edge, a puzzle half solved, its pieces scattered across the mountain's heart. Subscribe now, or let the mystery of these hikers' final moments slip into darkness, a silence you could have pierced with your support. The forensic sweep of the cave deepened, Dr. Carter's team working late into the night, their headlamps casting eerie glows over the skeletal remains and scattered gear. The scratches on the walls, jagged and uneven, hinted at a frantic effort to escape, while the broken knife, its blade snapped near the hilt, suggested a struggle beyond the flood's grasp. Carter examined the bones under high-powered microscopes, noting fractures on Liam's ribs and Ethan's arm, injuries inconsistent with a simple collapse. These were signs of impact, perhaps from a fall or a blow, raising the specter of human involvement. The journal page, clutched in Marcus's skeletal hand, bore smudged words beyond the initial entry. Someone here. Not us. A chilling fragment that sent a shiver through the lab. Ortiz, poring over the evidence, felt the case shift from a natural tragedy to a potential crime, her weathered face tightening as she ordered DNA analysis on every scrap. The sleeping bags, recently waterlogged, fueled her suspicion. Had they been deliberately placed in the lake, or had the flood's timing masked a darker truth? The investigation turned to the hikers' final day, retracing their steps with renewed urgency. Locals, pressed for details, recalled a shadowy figure near the overlook, a lone man in a hooded jacket who'd vanished when approached. A gas station clerk in Boone remembered selling supplies to the group on October 1st, but also to a stranger matching that description. His purchase of rope and a tarp raising red flags. Satellite data, reanalyzed, showed a brief heat signature off-trail hours before the storm, an anomaly dismissed as wildlife but now reconsidered. Ortiz assembled a profile, a poacher, a drifter, or a lost soul with motives unclear, someone who might have crossed paths with the hikers in the ravine's depths. The cave's isolation, miles from any trail, supported the theory. They'd been led or forced there, their gear a testament to a fight they couldn't win. Claire and Paul returned to the site, their footsteps heavy as they navigated the ravine, the air thick with the scent of damp earth and decay. The toy dinosaur, clutched by Claire, felt like a lifeline to Ethan. Her nephew's gift, now a relic of loss. Margaret joined them, her hands tracing Sarah's scarf, its green threads a fading echo of her daughter's spirit. The families demanded answers, their grief fueling a public outcry that pressured authorities to escalate. The TBI stepped in, their agents combing the region for the hooded figure, interviewing hermits and hunters who roamed the backcountry. A breakthrough came when a trapper, Amos Reed, admitted to seeing smoke near the ravine on October 3, 2020, a fire he'd avoided, fearing trouble. His description of a man with a limp and a scarred face matched the gas station clerk's memory, a lead that sent investigators into the hills. The cave yielded more clues. A rusted shovel, its handle wrapped in duct tape and a bloodstain on a rock, its DNA foreign to the hikers. The shovel, analyzed, bore traces of ginseng root, linking it to the illegal trade thriving in the Appalachians, a lucrative shadow economy. Ortiz connected it to the Mayfair case from the Tanaka disappearance, a parallel that chilled her. Had another poacher been involved? The blood sample, rushed to the lab, matched a known felon, Randall Rusty Crow, a 45-year-old drifter with a history of theft and assault, last seen in the area in 2020. His limp, a souvenir from a bar fight, and scarred face fit the witness accounts, painting him as a suspect who might have ambushed the hikers, taken their gear, and left them to die. The storm, a convenient cover, had buried his crime until the flood exposed it. Claire's voice broke as she heard the news, her faith in Marcus's leadership clashing with the horror of betrayal. While Margaret's sobs filled the room, Sarah's fate now tangled in violence. The public reeled, the Appalachian wilderness revealed as a stage for human darkness, its beauty a mask for treachery. Subscribe now, or let the truth of these hikers' brutal end be lost forever, a silence you could have shattered with your support. The revelation of Randall Rusty Crow as a suspect ignited a firestorm within the investigation, his name a dark thread weaving through the hikers' final hours. Dr. Carter's lab buzzed with urgency as the blood stain on the cave rock was cross-referenced, the DNA profile a near-perfect match to Crow's records from a 2018 assault conviction in Tennessee. The rusted shovel, its duct-taped handle a signature of backcountry poachers, yielded faint fingerprints, degraded but enough to confirm his presence. Ortiz pored over Crow's file, a litany of petty crimes, poaching, theft, trespassing, culminating in a 6-month stint that ended in early 2020, placing him in the Appalachians just before the hiker's disappearance. His limp, a legacy of a botched robbery, and the scarred face from a knife fight matched every witness description, a portrait of a man hardened by the wild and desperate for gain. The ginseng traces on the shovel tied him to the lucrative underground trade, suggesting he'd been digging in the ravine when the hikers stumbled into his territory, a collision that turned deadly. The TBI launched a manhunt, their agents fanning out across the rugged backcountry, knocking on doors of isolated cabins and questioning reclusive figures who knew the mountain's secrets. Crow's last known address, a dilapidated trailer near the Tennessee-North Carolina border, was abandoned, its windows boarded, the yard overgrown with weeds. Neighbors spoke of a man who kept to himself, vanishing after a stormy night in October 2020, his departure marked by a hurried sale of ginseng roots to a shady buyer in Asheville. Satellite imagery from that period showed a heat signature near the ravine, consistent with a campfire, its glow extinguished by the deluge that followed. The storm, a once-in-a-decade event, had been Crow's ally, washing away tracks and burying the crime until the sleeping bags floated to the lake's surface. Ortiz theorized he'd ambushed the group, using the shovel as a weapon, then stripped their gear, sleeping bags, backpacks, even the toy dinosaur, before fleeing as the flood rose. The cave, a natural trap, became his unintended vault, sealing the hiker's fate and his secret. Claire, Paul, and Margaret returned to the cave, their grief now laced with rage as they stood before the evidence. The journal page, with Marcus's cryptic, "Someone here, not us," felt like a warning unheeded, his leadership betrayed by a stranger's greed. Claire clutched the dinosaur toy, its plastic chipped but enduring, a symbol of Ethan's innocence lost to Crow's violence. Margaret traced Sarah's scarf, its green threads now a shroud for her daughter's final struggle, while Paul's hands shook as he held Emily's melted flashlight, its beam snuffed out by the cave's darkness. The families demanded justice, their voices joining a public outcry that flooded social media with "Nang, justice for the hikers," a hashtag that trended as the story spread. News crews descended, their cameras capturing the ravine's stark beauty against the grim tale unfolding, the Appalachians cast as a villainous stage. The forensic team dug deeper, uncovering a torn jacket fragment near the cave entrance, its fabric matching a brand Crow favored, the bloodstains on its lining a grim confirmation. The knife's broken blade, analyzed, bore microscopic metal traces from the shovel, suggesting a clash where Crow overpowered Marcus, The group's leader felled in defense of his team. The skeletons' positions, huddled, some with arms raised, painted a scene of resistance, their survival skills no match for a poacher's ruthlessness. Dr. Carter estimated they'd survived 2 days, their water bottles empty, their food caches raided, before succumbing to exposure and injury. The rockslide, triggered by the storm, had been a final blow, entombing them as Crow escaped with his loot. The manhunt intensified, agents tracking Crow's movements through pawnshop records and ginseng sales, a trail that led to a remote cabin in West Virginia. A raid at dawn revealed a stockpile of poached roots, a rusted truck, and a journal detailing his hauls, including an entry from October 2020. Big score, 10 fools left him to the flood. The evidence was damning, but Crow was gone, his trail cold, leaving investigators to piece together his escape. Ortiz suspected he'd fled to Canada, a common refuge for poachers, his limp slowing him but not stopping his flight. The families faced a hollow victory. Justice delayed, their loved one's killer still free. Claire vowed to keep searching, her son's questions about his father fueling her resolve, while Margaret and Paul joined support groups, their pain a bond with other victims' families. The public's fascination grew, the story a cautionary tale of wilderness and wickedness, its resolution hanging on Crow's capture. Yet, doubts lingered. The sleeping bag's recent submersion suggested Crow might have returned, perhaps to retrieve gear or cover his tracks, only to be thwarted by the flood. Divers found a submerged tarp near the lake, its fabric bearing Crow's fingerprints, a sign he'd been back in 2023. The cave's secondary entrance, uncovered by geologists, showed signs of recent disturbance, scratched earth, a broken branch, hinting at his presence before the storm dislodged the evidence. Ortiz ordered a stakeout, her team patrolling the lake's edge, their night vision goggles scanning for movement. The Appalachians, once a silent witness, now held a living threat, Crow's shadow looming over the unresolved case. The family's hope teetered, their grief a heavy load, as the mountains whispered secrets yet to be revealed. The stakeout along the lake's edge stretched into the humid nights of August 2024. Ranger Ortiz and her team cloaked in the shadows of the Nantahala National Forest, their breath visible in the cool air as they watched for any sign of Randall Rusty Crow. The tarp, its fingerprints a smoking gun, had shifted the investigation into a tense game of cat and mouse, the Appalachians now a battlefield where nature and human malice intertwined. Night vision goggles scanned the tree line, their green glow catching the occasional deer or owl, but no limping figure emerged. The diver's find had confirmed Crow's return, the tarp's waterlogged state suggesting he'd been there just weeks before the sleeping bags surfaced, perhaps to retrieve his stash or erase his tracks. Ortiz reviewed the cabin raid's haul, ginseng roots, a rusted shotgun, Crow's journal, its cryptic entries a taunt. Flood hit him good, but the lake gave him up. The words fueled her determination, a personal vendetta born from years of unsolved cases, her weathered face set with resolve. The forensic team pressed on, Dr. Carter's lab a hive of activity as they analyzed the tarp and cave debris. The fabric yielded traces of Crow's DNA, mingled with soil unique to the ravine, proving he'd handled it post-storm. The secondary cave entrance, its scratched earth a fresh wound, suggested he'd entered after the rockslide, likely in 2023, to salvage gear or bury evidence deeper. A broken lockpick found nearby, its metal etched with Crow's initials, sealed the link. He'd been meticulous, a poacher turned predator. The hiker's remains told a parallel tale. Marcus's skull fracture, a fatal blow from the shovel. Emily and Sarah's broken fingers, signs of a struggle. The other's defensive wounds, a group overwhelmed. The journal page, someone here, not us, now screamed of Crow's ambush, his greed turning a survival trek into a massacre. Carter estimated the attack occurred on October 2, 2020, the storm's onset covering his escape as the flood rose, trapping the hikers in their cave refuge. The manhunt expanded, agents coordinating with Canadian border patrols, their radios crackling with updates on Crow's possible route. A trucker in West Virginia recalled a scarred man hitching a ride north in late October 2020, his limp pronounced, his duffel bag heavy with roots. Pawn shop records in Ontario showed a sale of hiking gear, backpacks, a camera matching Tom's, linked to a man fitting Crow's description, the trail growing colder but persistent. Ortiz dispatched a sketch artist, the resulting image plastered across rural outposts, its scarred face haunting gas stations and diners. Locals whispered of a limping ghost, a poacher's legend, some claiming to have seen him near the Quebec border, his presence a specter in the wilderness. The TBI offered a $50,000 reward, the public's outrage swelling dire justice for the hikers into a movement, donations pouring in as families shared stories of lost loved ones. Claire, Paul, and Margaret channeled their grief into action, joining Ortiz on patrols, their presence a silent plea. Claire's son, now 14, carried Marcus's compass, its needle frozen like their hope, while Margaret clutched Sarah's scarf, its green threads a lifeline to her daughter's memory. Paul's voice broke as he recounted Emily's laughter, a sound lost to Crow's violence. The cave became a pilgrimage site, flowers wilting at its entrance, a shrine to the 10 souls taken too soon. The public's fascination grew, true crime podcasts dissecting the case, their narrators painting Crow as a mountain monster, his limp a mark of Cain. Yet the family's pain was raw, their nights filled with nightmares of the ravine, the storm's roar a constant echo. A breakthrough came on September 15, 2024, when a trapper in Quebec reported a limping man trading ginseng near a remote lake, his scarred face matching the sketch. Agents converged, their boats cutting through fog, but Crow had vanished again, leaving behind a bloodied bandage and a rusted knife, evidence he was wounded, perhaps from a recent encounter. The bandage's blood confirmed his DNA, a sign he was still alive, his flight desperate. Ortiz intensified the border watch, drones scanning the dense forests, their hum a relentless pursuit. The cave's secondary entrance was re-examined, revealing a hidden crevice with more gear, a torn map, a watch stopped at 3:17 a.m., suggesting Crow had lingered, perhaps injured, before fleeing. The map, marked with poaching sites, pointed to a network, implicating others in his trade. A conspiracy that deepened the mystery. The families faced a torturous wait, their hope flickering as Crow's shadow loomed. Claire vowed to see him caged, her son's future dependent on justice, while Margaret and Paul clung to the possibility of closure. The Appalachians, once a sanctuary, now held a predator, its trails a maze of danger. The public's eyes were fixed, the story a gripping saga of survival and betrayal, its end unwritten. Subscribe now or let the pursuit of this killer's capture fade into the mountain silence, a void you could have filled with your support.